You're fired. Security will make sure you never work in this city again." Water dripped from the shattered conference table as Amara Bennett stood frozen watching 100 million disappear in a cloud of smoke from the destroyed video equipment. The most important business call of the year had just died with a single spark. 20 minutes earlier, Amara was cleaning Conference Room A during her Saturday shift, the weekend hours that let her care for her mother with Alzheimer's during the week. The room was supposed to be empty. Instead, she found CEO Ethan Caldwell in an emergency video call with German executives, stress radiating from every line of his body. Multiple coffee cups suggested he'd been there all night. "Stay and clean quietly," he'd snapped. "We can't reschedule this call. Hamburg is already frustrated with our delays." Through the speaker, she heard German voices growing tense, speaking with Hamburg accents she knew from her years in Berlin. But something was wrong. The translator was getting everything backwards. "The contract clauses are completely unacceptable under German law," Dr. Hauptmann was saying urgently in German. "Dr. Hauptmann says they love the contract structure and want to finalize immediately," the translator reported cheerfully. Amara's blood ran cold. This was about to become a disaster. When Amara reached for the water pitcher part of her routine, her elbow caught the edge. Water cascaded across the table, hitting the video equipment with a sizzle of sparks. The screen went black. The silence was deafening. Ethan's face transformed from confusion to pure rage. "Do you have any idea what you've done? That was 18 months of relationship building destroyed by your clumsiness." "Sir, it was an accident." "An accident." His voice was deadly quiet. "You destroyed a $100 million negotiation because you can't clean around a simple business meeting without knocking things over like a child." Isaac, his assistant, shifted uncomfortably. "Sir, maybe we can reconnect. With what equipment do you think the Germans will wait while we explain that our cleaning lady destroyed our technology?" The cruelty in Ethan's words was deliberate, designed to humiliate. Around them, weekend staff began gathering, watching the spectacle unfold. What Ethan didn't know, what no one in that building knew, was that the woman he was destroying held a PhD in applied linguistics from Humboldt University, Berlin. Dr. Amara Bennett had spent 6 years researching exactly the communication failures that were about to cost his company everything. She spoke 6 languages fluently, had published papers on international business communication, and could have prevented this disaster with a single sentence if anyone had seen her as more than invisible help. But those days were behind her. When her mother, once a distinguished Columbia professor, was diagnosed with early-onset Alzheimer's, Amara had sacrificed her career for weekend cleaning jobs that let her provide care during the week. For 8 months, she'd watched Westbridge Group make preventable translation mistakes, sending anonymous analyses that were dismissed as nonsense from someone who doesn't understand business. Now, as Ethan continued his assault, something flickered in her eyes. Not anger or fear, but pity. Pity for a man who was about to destroy his own company through ignorance while the one person who could save him stood invisible before him. "So you're fired," Ethan declared, his voice echoing off glass walls. "Security will escort you out immediately. And if I find out you've shared anything you heard here..." He leaned closer, his breath hot against her face. "I have connections in every major corporation in Manhattan. Cross me and you'll be unemployable." As security approached, Isaac caught something in Amara's expression that made his stomach drop. Not defeat, but knowledge. Dangerous, comprehensive knowledge walking out the door. Later, as Amara packed her few belongings, a co-worker whispered to Isaac, "Real shame about the German call. Did you know she speaks perfect German university-level training? Always wondered what someone with that education was doing cleaning floors." But by then it was too late. The woman who could have saved everything was gone, and the $100 million deal she'd tried to warn them about was already falling apart in ways they couldn't yet imagine. What secret expertise just walked out the door, and how much will it cost to get it back? 8 months earlier, Amara had first walked through Westbridge Group's service entrance, her hope carefully hidden beneath the necessity of survival and the weight of circumstances she'd never imagined facing when she arrived in America as a bright graduate student dreaming of bridging cultures through language. The service entrance smelled of industrial cleaning supplies and the kind of institutional efficiency that kept buildings running while remaining invisible to the people in the shining offices above. She'd answered an ad for part-time weekend cleaning because it offered the flexibility she desperately needed, Saturday and Sunday work that paid enough to help with her mother's care, while leaving weekdays free for the increasingly complex medical appointments, medication management, and gentle conversations that might still reach her mother through the thickening fog of Alzheimer's disease. The application process had been deliberately straightforward. She'd listed her work experience as administrative assistant and research support, and her education as some college coursework. Not technically lies, but carefully crafted truths that omitted the PhD, the published research, the academic conferences where she'd presented papers on the very communication challenges that plagued international business. She needed the job immediately, and explaining her real qualifications would have raised questions she wasn't emotionally prepared to answer about why someone with her background was applying for minimum wage cleaning work. The truth was heartbreakingly simple and impossibly complicated. Dr. Sarah Bennett's specialized Alzheimer's care cost $8,400 monthly, at the most basic level more, if they wanted a dignified multilingual environment where her mother's remaining linguistic abilities might be preserved. Amara's savings from her Berlin Research Fellowship, carefully accumulated over years of academic frugality, had lasted exactly 14 months after her mother's diagnosis. Her German credentials needed validation through a Byzantine-American bureaucratic process that cost thousands in fees, took 18 to 36 months, and required the kind of full-time attention impossible while caring for someone with progressing dementia. Meanwhile, her mother needed care now, not when a committee decided her European PhD met American standards. Weekend cleaning paid $15 hour modest, until she calculated that consistent weekend work could cover nearly half of her mother's basic care costs. The schedule allowed her to spend weekdays managing her mother's care, researching treatment options, and maintaining the kind of emotional presence that sometimes helped Dr. Bennett remember who she was and why that mattered. Language is love made audible, her mother had always said during lectures on comparative literature, back when she could remember the 7 languages she spoke and the students who hung on every word. Now Amara whispered those same words back to her in German, Spanish, and French, hoping one might reach through the darkness, claiming her mother's brilliant mind. For 8 months, Amara moved through Westbridge like a benevolent ghost, invisible to executives who measured human worth by salary and title, but gradually becoming aware of the communication disasters that plagued nearly every international negotiation the company attempted. Her trained mind couldn't stop analyzing, couldn't stop identifying preventable failures that cost millions. In her 3rd week, she'd overheard a catastrophic Japanese negotiation where cultural context was so misunderstood that both sides left believing they'd agreed to different terms. The interpreter had technical competence, but missed the subtle hierarchical language patterns central to Japanese business. When Yamamoto-san used the phrase, "that requires careful consideration," in response to delivery timelines, he was politely rejecting the proposed schedule. The Americans thought he was intrigued. When the manufacturing timeline failed, the Japanese quietly withdrew. Each side blamed the other. Amara had watched the disaster unfold, knowing how to prevent it, but unable to share her expertise without raising questions about her background. She began leaving anonymous notes in the company's suggestion box, signed, "A concerned employee with international experience." They were dismissed as interference from someone who didn't understand real business. By month 3, she developed an informal system to observe Westbridge's global communication failures. She timed her cleaning routes to overhear calls in various languages, not to spy, but because her mind couldn't ignore what it understood. French investors misinterpreted American directness as rudeness. Mandarin misunderstandings led to flawed specifications. Spanish contract ambiguities voided deals. Each disaster followed a pattern: initial optimism, deepening confusion, rising frustration, and ultimate collapse. The cost wasn't just financial, it was relational, cultural, human. Isaac Nolan had been the first to see her. Where others ignored her, he offered small talk, kindness recognition. One Saturday, he noticed her reading a German linguistics journal retrieved from the recycling bin. "You speak German?" he asked. "A little." "For family," she replied. "I studied some in college. Struggled with business terms." He watched her, then added, "You understand more than most people know, don't you?" She said nothing, but her silence told him everything. The turning point came 6 weeks before the water pitcher incident. Amara witnessed a devastating mistranslation during a merger negotiation with Schneider Engineering, a prestigious Frankfurt firm. The regular interpreter was hospitalized with food poisoning. The backup spoke textbook German but couldn't understand Hamburg's dialect or legal jargon. Dr. Muller clearly said, "The proposed liability structure violates German corporate law under Section 93. We cannot proceed without major revision." The translator confidently paraphrased, "They're happy to proceed with minor changes." Amara watched both sides smile and nod unknowingly, walking into a legal disaster. The liability risk could expose board members to personal financial loss and career-ending audits. That night, Amara wrote a detailed doctoral-level analysis at home. She explained dialect differences, cited German law, outlined regulatory pitfalls, and proposed a legally sound alternative. She emailed it anonymously to Isaac. He excitedly brought it to Karen Williams, head of admin. Karen skimmed it for 30 seconds before deleting. "We pay translators thousands because they're qualified," she said. "We don't need tips from anonymous janitors." 3 weeks later, the deal collapsed exactly as Amara had predicted. Millions lost. 18 months of trust destroyed. Now, as she packed her few belongings from her locker, she wondered if she should have tried harder. But she knew the truth. People like Karen didn't see uniforms as worn by minds that had once lectured at international symposiums. Her phone buzzed. Sarah, having a good day. Asking for her daughter. "Would you like to visit?" Amara smiled softly. At least one person still saw her fully. Monday morning brought the crisis Amara had seen coming, arriving with the inexorable force of a natural disaster that had been building for months beneath the surface of corporate confidence and technological optimism. Without functioning video equipment, and with their regular German interpreter, Hans Müller, still hospitalized with complications from severe food poisoning, Westbridge Group faced a perfect storm of communication breakdown that threatened to destroy not just one partnership, but their entire European expansion strategy. Dr. Hauptmann's team, already frustrated by Saturday's abrupt disconnection and what they perceived as American technical incompetence, had sent a formal email that arrived in Ethan's inbox like a diplomatic bomb wrapped in polite business language. "We are deeply concerned about the technical difficulties that interrupted our critical negotiations." The email began in precisely worded English that carried undertones of professional disappointment. More troubling, however, are the fundamental misunderstandings about liability structures that emerged during our discussion. "We request an emergency teleconference to clarify what appear to be serious miscommunications about legal compliance requirements that must be resolved immediately before any contract finalization can proceed." Isaac sat in Ethan's office Monday morning, watching his boss pace like a caged predator while the implications of the German email sank in. The CEO looked like he hadn't slept since Saturday, his usually immaculate appearance disheveled in a way that suggested he'd spent the weekend wrestling with problems he didn't fully understand. The backup interpreter from Saturday insists everything was going perfectly. Ethan snarled, gesturing at the printed email with the kind of frustration that comes from knowing something is wrong but not knowing how to fix it. Claims Dr. Hauptmann was enthusiastic about our terms, eager to finalize details. But this email suggests they think we're either incompetent or deliberately trying to mislead them about legal compliance. Sir. Isaac began carefully, his voice carrying the hesitation of someone about to suggest something his boss didn't want to hear. What if the translator was wrong? What if there were serious communication issues we didn't catch because we don't actually understand what Dr. Hauptmann was saying? Tusa. Impossible. Ethan stopped pacing, his voice sharp, with the kind of certainty that often preceded major mistakes. We use the most expensive translation firm in the city. They've handled international negotiations for Fortune 500 companies. They wouldn't make basic errors on something this important. But even as he said it, Ethan felt a growing unease that had been building since Saturday's disaster. The German team's email contained specific references to legal requirements and regulatory frameworks that seemed far more complex than the simple contract modifications his translator had described. Either Dr. Hauptmann was dramatically overcomplicating straightforward business terms, or something fundamental had been lost in translation. Isaac spent Monday morning making increasingly desperate calls to every qualified interpreter and translation service in the greater New York area. Their primary firm was fully booked with emergency situations for other clients. Apparently, Saturday had been a bad day for international business communication across multiple companies. The university language department had no one available on short notice who specialized in business terminology. Every qualified German business interpreter in Manhattan seemed to be committed to other projects or unavailable for the kind of high-stakes legal negotiation that couldn't afford even minor errors. It's like every German speaker in the city has simultaneously become unavailable. Isaac reported to Ethan at noon, his voice carrying the exhaustion of someone who'd spent hours being told that what they needed simply wasn't possible on the timeline they required. Meanwhile, news of Westbridge's weekend crisis was beginning to leak through the insular world of international business. A brief mention appeared in the Financial Times Monday morning email newsletter. Sources report technical difficulties during weekend negotiations between Westbridge Group and Hamburg engineering firm, raising questions about American companies' preparedness for complex European partnerships. The afternoon emergency call was scheduled for 2 p.m. prime business hours in both New York and Hamburg, a time that should have facilitated clear communication and decisive progress. Instead, it became a masterclass in how cultural misunderstanding could destroy months of careful relationship building in real time. The replacement interpreter, sourced from a general translation service that specialized in medical and legal documents rather than business negotiations, spoke grammatically correct German but possessed no understanding of the cultural context that governed German business relationships or the specific regulatory environment that shaped corporate partnerships. Shaktichiti, we continue to have fundamental concerns about liability allocation under German corporate law, Dr. Hauptmann said at the call's beginning, his tone already carrying the strained patience of someone who'd spent the weekend researching American business practices and finding them wanting. The proposed structure creates unacceptable exposure for German shareholders under our regulatory framework. We need complete restructuring of these clauses to ensure compliance with Sections 93 and 116 of the Aktiengesetz. The interpreter, clearly struggling with legal terminology that wasn't covered in standard business, German courses delivered a translation that bore little resemblance to Dr. Hauptmann's actual concerns. Dr. Hauptmann says they have some small concerns about liability details and would like minor adjustments to make their shareholders more comfortable with the arrangement. Excellent! Ethan responded with relief that was visible to everyone in the room. We're certainly willing to make small adjustments. Which specific clauses need minor tweaking to address your shareholders' comfort level? The disconnect between question and answer created a cascade of confusion that grew worse with each exchange. Dr. Hauptmann's voice rose in German as he tried to explain that they weren't talking about shareholder comfort, but legal compliance, not minor adjustments. Complete restructuring. The current structure violates fundamental principles of German corporate governance. This could result in personal criminal liability for our board members under German law. He's getting excited about the specific technical adjustments. The interpreter assured Ethan cheerfully, completely missing the alarm and frustration in Dr. Hauptmann's increasingly urgent tone. He wants to discuss the detailed legal specifications that will make everyone more comfortable with the partnership. Isaac watched this exchange with growing horror, his limited college German insufficient to understand the specific legal terminology, but adequate to recognize that Dr. Hauptmann sounded like someone trying to prevent a disaster rather than celebrate a breakthrough. The German executive's tone carried the kind of urgency that suggested impending catastrophe, not enthusiasm for technical details. The call continued for 90 excruciating minutes, with each side becoming more confused and frustrated as the interpreter failed to bridge not just linguistic, but cultural and legal gaps that required deep understanding of both business systems. Dr. Hauptmann's team could be heard conferring in rapid, worried German in the background conversations that the interpreter either couldn't follow or chose not to translate. The call ended with what both sides thought was agreement to finalize technical details by Thursday and proceed with documentation. But Isaac suspected with growing certainty that they had agreed to completely different interpretations of what technical details meant and what documentation would contain. Tuesday morning brought confirmation of his worst fears delivered in the form of an email that would reshape everyone's understanding of how badly things had gone wrong. Dr. Hauptmann's team sent a comprehensive analysis that read like a legal brief prepared for litigation. The document outlined fundamental violations of German corporate law in the proposed contract structure detailed grave concerns about Westbridge Group's understanding of international business compliance and provided specific citations to German regulations that the American proposal allegedly violated. Most damaging was the email's conclusion, written in the kind of formal language that preceded the termination of business relationships. We are immediately suspending all negotiations pending resolution of these critical legal compliance issues. We must question whether Westbridge Group possesses the international competency and cultural sensitivity necessary for this partnership. We will be evaluating other American firms that demonstrate greater understanding of European business requirements and regulatory frameworks. Ethan's face drained of color as Isaac read the email aloud in the sudden silence of the executive conference room. $100 million in partnership opportunities were evaporating in real time, but more importantly, Westbridge's reputation in European business circles was being systematically destroyed by communication failures they couldn't even identify, let alone fix. The crisis deepened throughout Tuesday as word spread through the interconnected world of international business. Two other German companies quietly postponed scheduled negotiations with Westbridge, citing concerns about communication compatibility. A Swiss engineering firm requested additional references before proceeding with a previously routine partnership discussion. The European business press began asking questions about American companies' preparedness for the cultural complexities of international partnerships. By Wednesday morning, Westbridge Group's stock price had dropped 8% as financial analysts questioned the company's international growth strategy. The board of directors scheduled an emergency meeting for Friday morning to assess the company's international competency and strategic direction. Corporate language that everyone understood meant Ethan's job was on the line. "Get me someone who actually speaks German," Ethan demanded during Wednesday's crisis management meeting, his voice carrying the desperation of someone watching their career crumble due to factors they couldn't control or understand. "I don't care what it costs. Find a legal interpreter who understands German business law, someone who can actually communicate with these people, instead of making everything worse." But Wednesday afternoon's emergency search proved that finding the right expertise on short notice was more complicated than simply offering more money. The combination of specialized legal terminology, specific North German business dialect, and the high-stakes nature of the negotiation created requirements that eliminated most available interpreters. Those with the right qualifications were already committed to other projects and couldn't break existing contracts for new work. As Thursday dawned with no solution in sight and Friday's board meeting approaching like an execution date, Isaac found himself returning to a pattern of memories that had been nagging at him for days. Anonymous emails with sophisticated linguistic analysis that had predicted exactly this kind of disaster. A weekend cleaning woman reading German academic journals, conversations where she'd seemed to understand complex business discussions with an expertise that went far beyond casual familiarity. He pulled up his deleted email folder, scrolling back through months of correspondence until he found what he was looking for. The anonymous analyses were remarkable doctoral-level work that demonstrated understanding of not just German language but German business culture, legal frameworks, and the subtle communication patterns that could make or break international partnerships. The writing style was academic, precise, sophisticated. The insights were prophetic. Every prediction about communication failures had materialized exactly as described. Most importantly, the analyses demonstrated exactly the kind of cross-cultural expertise that could have prevented the current crisis if anyone had bothered to take them seriously. Isaac's hands trembled as the pieces connected with undeniable clarity. The timing of the emails, the level of expertise, the detailed knowledge of Westbridge's specific translation problems, the way certain cleaning schedules coincided with international calls. Someone inside the building had been watching their international communication failures for months, documenting every mistake, predicting every disaster, and trying to help them avoid exactly the kind of catastrophe that was now destroying the company. Someone they'd fired 3 days ago for accidentally knocking over a water pitcher. He grabbed his phone and dialed the number from Amara's employee file, but it went straight to voicemail. The message was brief and professional. "You've reached Dr. Amara Bennett. Please leave a message and I'll return your call as soon as possible." Dr. Amara Bennett. Isaac stared at his phone, finally understanding the magnitude of what they'd lost. Wednesday evening found Amara in the common room at Riverside Memory Care, reading to her mother from a German poetry collection. Dr. Sarah Bennett's eyes held the distant look that had become increasingly common, but occasionally they'd focus with startling clarity. "Your pronunciation is beautiful, sweetheart," her mother said suddenly in German. "Just like when you were little and wanted to sound like the professors who visited from Berlin." "Learned from the best teacher in the world," Amara replied softly, also in German. Her phone had been buzzing all day with calls from a number she recognized as Westbridge Group. She'd ignored them. Whatever crisis they were facing, it wasn't her problem anymore. But that evening, Isaac appeared in the memory care facility's lobby looking exhausted and desperate. "Dr. Bennett," he said when she met him in the hallway, "I need to talk to you." Amara's eyebrows rose at the title. "I think you have me confused with someone else. I'm just the cleaning lady you fired 3 days ago." "No." Isaac said quietly. "You're Dr. Amara Bennett, Ph.D. in Applied Linguistics from Humboldt University, Berlin. You're the person who's been sending anonymous analyses of our translation failures for 8 months. You're the only person in New York City who can save a $100 million deal that's falling apart because we don't understand what we did wrong." Amara stared at him for a long moment. "How did you... The emails, the German journal I saw you reading, the way you listened during international calls." Isaac's voice carried exhaustion and desperation. "I should have realized sooner. We all should have." "And what makes you think I'd help after being fired for a clumsy accident?" Isaac pulled out his phone and showed her the latest email from Dr. Hauptmann's team. Amara read it quickly, her expression growing more serious with each line. "They're not just upset about contract terms," she said finally. "They think you're either incompetent or deliberately trying to deceive them. Dr. Hauptmann is questioning your integrity, not just your business terms. Can you fix it?" Amara looked back toward the common room, where her mother was dozing in her chair, a German poetry book in her lap. "Why should I? Your CEO made it clear that people like me don't belong in serious business discussions." "Even because," Isaac said quietly, "there are 300 people working at Westbridge Group. Security guards, administrative assistants, cleaning staff, cafeteria workers, people who need their jobs to take care of their families, just like you need to take care of your mother. If this deal falls apart, if we lose our international credibility, a lot of innocent people are going to suffer." Amara was quiet for a long time. Finally, she sighed. "The video equipment in conference room A, is it repaired?" "Better than new. We upgraded everything." "And Mr. Caldwell, is he prepared to listen to someone he fired, or is he going to spend the whole meeting questioning my right to be there?" Isaac hesitated. "He's desperate. The board is meeting Friday morning to discuss the crisis. If we don't resolve this by then, he might lose his job too." "Good," Amara said simply. "Maybe that will help him understand what it feels like to have your livelihood threatened by other people's assumptions." She was quiet for another moment, then made her decision. "I'll need to review all the previous communications first. Every email, every transcript, every document related to this negotiation. And I'll need Isaac assurance that I'm there as a linguistic consultant, not as the cleaning lady who got a lucky break. Sign done. Whatever you need." Thursday morning at 6 a.m., Isaac found an envelope slipped under his office door. Inside was the most comprehensive analysis of cross-cultural business communication he'd ever encountered. Every mistranslation was identified and corrected. Every cultural misunderstanding was explained. A complete strategy for rebuilding trust with the German partners was outlined in precise detail. At the bottom, in careful handwriting, "Tell Mr. Caldwell that his company's international reputation can still be saved. The person who can save it will be in conference room A at 9 a.m. Come prepared to listen more than you speak." At 8:45 a.m. conference room. Filled with Westbridge Group's senior executives, emergency legal counsel, and backup translators standing by. The air was thick with desperation and barely controlled panic. Ethan paced the room's perimeter, checking his watch obsessively. The company's stock price had dropped 12% since news of the German partnership troubles had leaked to financial media. 3 other international deals were now under review, as partners questioned Westbridge's cross-cultural competency. "Isaac, you're absolutely certain this person can help us?" "Sir, I've never been more certain of anything in my life." At exactly 9:00 a.m., the conference room door opened. Amara Bennett stepped inside, and everything changed. Gone was the invisible cleaning woman in a blue uniform. This was Dr. Amara Bennett, International Business Communications Specialist, wearing a simple but professional navy blazer she'd kept from her Berlin days, and carrying a leather portfolio filled with 8 months of carefully documented observations. The room fell silent as executives processed the transformation. Ethan's face cycled through confusion, recognition, and something that might have been shame. "You, the cleaning lady? Dr. Bennett?" Amara corrected calmly. "And yes, I was also your weekend cleaning staff. Both things can be true simultaneously." She moved to the head of the conference table with quiet authority. "Dr. Hauptmann and his team are waiting for this call. They're frustrated, insulted, and prepared to terminate all business relationships with Westbridge Group. They believe you've been deliberately misleading them about legal compliance issues." The video call connected. Dr. Hauptmann's stern face appeared on screen, flanked by his legal team, and wearing an expression of skeptical professionalism. "Stakitu, Dr. Hauptmann." Amara began in flawless German. "I am Dr. Amara Bennett, linguistic consultant for Westbridge Group. I want to begin by offering our sincere apologies for the serious miscommunications that have occurred. We now understand that our translation services have failed to accurately convey your legitimate concerns about legal compliance." Dr. Hauptmann's eyebrows rose slightly. For the first time in days, he was hearing his language spoken with academic precision and cultural sensitivity. "Shakti, Dr. Bennett," he replied in German. "It's refreshing to finally speak with someone who appears to understand the gravity of this situation. We had begun to question whether Westbridge Group possessed the international competency necessary for serious business partnerships. I understand your concerns completely," Amara continued in German. "I've reviewed all previous communications, and I can see exactly where the translation failures occurred. We're prepared to address every legal compliance issue you've raised and restructure the partnership terms to meet German regulatory requirements." For the next hour, Amara facilitated the most productive international negotiation in Westbridge Group's history. She didn't simply translate words, she translated meaning, cultural context, legal implications, and business customs. When Dr. Hauptmann expressed concerns about liability structures, she explained not just what he was saying, but why it mattered within German legal and business traditions. When Ethan proposed modifications, she framed them in language that resonated with German regulatory frameworks, while demonstrating respect for their business culture. The transformation in the room was remarkable. Dr. Hauptmann's team began smiling as they realized they were finally being heard and understood. Charts were shared with genuine comprehension. Legal details were resolved through precise communication that both sides could trust. By 10:30 a.m., the $100 million partnership was not only saved, it was expanded and strengthened. Dr. Hauptmann's team was so impressed by the cultural sensitivity and linguistic precision that they agreed to introduce Westbridge to other German companies seeking American partners. "Chikata, Dr. Bennett," Dr. Hauptmann said as the formal negotiations concluded, "Your intervention has restored our faith in this partnership. We look forward to working with Westbridge Group, provided that future communications maintain this level of cultural competency and respect." As the German team signed off with genuine warmth, Conference Room A remained silent, except for the sound of 15 people trying to process what they'd just witnessed. Amara closed her portfolio and stood. "The formal agreements will arrive tomorrow. I'll review all German language documents before you sign them. Dr. Hauptmann has agreed to serve as a reference for other German partnerships." She turned toward the door. "Wait." Ethan's voice was barely a whisper. "Dr. Bennett, I need to understand. Who are you, really?" Amara paused, her hand on the door handle. When she turned back, her expression held no anger or triumph, only the quiet dignity of someone who had finally been allowed to be herself. "I'm someone who needed flexible work to care for her mother with Alzheimer's," she said simply. "Someone who watched your company make preventable mistakes for 8 months while being told that cleaning staff don't understand business. Someone who holds a doctorate in the exact field you needed most, but couldn't afford the time or money to validate her credentials properly. She looked around the room at the faces of people who had walked past her for months without seeing her. And now, she concluded, I'm someone who just saved your company's international reputation. The question is, what are you going to do with that information? The conference room door closed with a soft click that seemed to echo through the profound silence of people confronting their own blindness. 15 executives sat motionless, each grappling with the magnitude of what they had just witnessed and what it revealed about their assumptions, their prejudices, and their failures as human beings. Ethan remained standing at the head of the table, his usual commanding presence reduced to something hollow and shaken. The man who had built his career on decisive judgment and unwavering confidence now faced the crushing realization that his most fundamental assumptions about human worth had been catastrophically wrong. Ms. Karen Williams, who had deleted Amara's analyses without reading them, stared at her hands as if they belonged to a stranger. Isaac looked like someone who had just watched the sun rise in the west, illuminating a world he thought he understood, but had never really seen. Over the next several hours, as news of the successful negotiations spread through the building, the true scope of what they had lost became clear. Amara hadn't just saved one deal, she had been quietly preventing disasters for 8 months, while they treated her as invisible. Ethan spent the afternoon reviewing every anonymous email Isaac had saved, every correction Amara had tried to make, every warning she had sent about translation failures that could have cost them millions. The pattern was undeniable. She had been trying to help them succeed, while they dismissed her expertise because of her job title. By evening, Ethan found himself standing outside Riverside Memory Care, holding a bouquet of flowers and trying to find the courage to face the woman whose life he had disrupted through his own prejudice and blindness. He found Amara in the garden, sitting beside an elegant woman in her 70s, who possessed the bearing of someone accustomed to intellectual authority. Dr. Sarah Bennett still carried traces of the distinguished professor she had been, even as Alzheimer's slowly erased the neural pathways that had once connected languages and cultures with effortless precision. "Mama, this is Mr. Caldwell," Amara said when she noticed Ethan approaching. "He's from the company where I worked." Dr. Bennett smiled with the gentle confusion of someone whose mind existed partially in the present and partially in memories from decades past. "How lovely. Are you one of Amara's colleagues from the university?" She's always been so good with languages ever since she was small. The innocent question hit Ethan like a physical blow. In her mother's deteriorating memory, Amara was still the accomplished academic she had been before sacrifice redefined her life. Dr. Bennett saw her daughter as Dr. Bennett, the respected linguist, not as the cleaning woman that economic necessity had forced her to become. Something like that. Ethan managed his voice thick with emotions he couldn't name. She gets her gift from her father. Dr. Bennett continued, her voice carrying the cadence of someone who had spent decades lecturing. He was a translator for the United Nations before he died. Always said that language is the bridge between hearts that have never met. Amara gently adjusted her mother's blanket, speaking to her in soft German phrases that brought fleeting moments of recognition to the older woman's eyes. Ethan watched this quiet act of love and realized he was witnessing something sacred, a daughter's devotion that had led her to sacrifice her career, her status, her professional identity, all to provide dignity and care for someone who might not even remember her name tomorrow. "How long has she been here?" Ethan asked quietly after Dr. Bennett had dozed off in her chair. "The 3 years." Amara replied, her voice steady, but her eyes revealing the weight she carried daily. Early onset Alzheimer's at 58. She was teaching comparative literature at Columbia, internationally recognized for her work on multilingual literary analysis. "This facility is what I can afford on weekend cleaning wages." Ethan looked around the modest common room, noting the worn furniture and institutional feel that spoke of limited resources stretched to cover unlimited needs. There are better facilities. Private ones with specialized Alzheimer's care music therapy programs, staff trained in multiple languages who could communicate with her using whatever linguistic pathways might still be intact. Yes, Amara said simply, her tone holding no bitterness, just the kind of acceptance that comes from facing impossible choices with grace. There are, but they cost more than I could make in several years, even with full-time professional work. Some sacrifices are made not because they're easy, but because they're necessary. Dr. Bennett? Ethan began, then stopped. Using her proper title felt both strange and essential, a small act of recognition that was long overdue. I owe you an apology that goes far beyond words. Amara turned to face him directly, and for the first time since he had known her, she didn't look away or defer to his perceived authority. You owe me more than an apology, Mr. Caldwell. You owe me the recognition that I am a human being worthy of basic respect, regardless of what work I do to survive. You owe that same recognition to every person who works in your building, the security guards, the cafeteria staff, the administrative assistants, everyone whose contributions you've dismissed because their job titles don't match your definition of importance. The words hit him like physical blows, each one accurate and deserved. You're right. You saved my company today, prevented a disaster that would have destroyed hundreds of jobs, but that's not really why I'm here. I'm here because I treated you like you were invisible when you were the most qualified person in my building. I'm here because I measured your worth by your uniform instead of your humanity. A small smile touched Amara's lips. Not forgiveness, but acknowledgement that he was finally beginning to understand the magnitude of his failure. What happens now? Ethan asked the question, carrying the weight of someone whose entire worldview had been dismantled in a single day. Now I go back inside and read to my mother in 3 different languages, hoping one of them reaches her today, Amara said. Tomorrow I figure out how to pay next month's care facility fees since I no longer have a weekend job. Next week I start looking for work that allows me to maintain my dignity while caring for someone I love. Ethan felt something fundamental crack inside his chest. Not his heart breaking, but his conscience finally breaking open to truths he had spent years avoiding. What if you didn't have to look for work? What if you had a position that actually used your qualifications, respected your expertise, and compensated you appropriately for skills that could transform how we do business? Amara studied his face with the careful attention of someone who had learned not to trust easy promises. Doing what exactly? Director of International Communications, overseeing all cross-cultural negotiations, rebuilding our translation protocols, training our entire staff to actually understand the cultures we're trying to do business with, instead of simply imposing American expectations on international partners. The offer hung between them like a bridge waiting to be crossed, substantial enough to support hope, but fragile enough to collapse under the weight of past betrayals. And if I said yes? Amara asked with the precision of someone who understood that words have consequences. Would I be Dr. Bennett to everyone in that building? Would my expertise be respected, my voice be heard, my humanity be acknowledged? Would you implement real changes in how your company treats all employees, not just the ones with advanced degrees? Or would I still be the cleaning lady who got promoted in everyone's minds? It was the right question, the only question that truly mattered. Ethan was quiet for a long moment, watching Dr. Bennett sleep peacefully in her chair, while late afternoon sunlight streamed through windows that overlooked a modest garden where other families gathered for visits that meant everything and would be forgotten by morning. I can't change the past, he said finally, I can't undo the months of invisibility, the dismissal, the assumptions I made about your worth based on your circumstances. But I can change the future. Not just for you, but for everyone who works at Westbridge Group. I can create a company where people are valued for their contributions and treated with dignity regardless of their job titles. And that's a significant promise, Amara observed. It's the only promise that matters. Ethan replied, and I'd like you to help me keep it. 6 months later, Westbridge Group looked identical from the outside, the same glass and steel tower reaching toward the sky, but everything inside had been transformed in ways that couldn't be measured in quarterly reports or stock prices. Amara's office occupied the 38th floor with views of the Hudson River and walls lined with books in 8 different languages. Her brass nameplate read, Dr. Amara Bennett, Director of International Communications and Cultural Relations. But the real change wasn't in titles or corner offices. It was in how people throughout the organization saw each other, spoke to each other, and recognized the dignity that exists in every role and every person. The transformation had begun with simple but powerful changes. Ethan mandated that all employees, regardless of position, department, or salary level, introduce themselves by name and role during meetings. Cleaning staff, security guards, administrative assistants, cafeteria workers, executives, everyone became a person with a story worth knowing, contributions worth acknowledging, and perspectives worth hearing. I want to know who keeps our building running, Ethan had announced during the first company-wide meeting after Amara's appointment. I want to know their names, their skills, their ideas for how we can do better. We are not a hierarchy of human value. We are a community of people working toward common goals. Ms. Karen Williams had fought the changes, initially clinging to the rigid hierarchies that had defined her career and her sense of order. When she'd attempted to block Amara's access to executive meetings, arguing that support staff shouldn't influence strategic decisions, Ethan's response had been swift and public. Ms. Williams has been transferred to our Boston office, he'd announced during a senior staff meeting, where she'll be working with our new Director of Inclusive Human Resources to develop better approaches to employee development and recognition. The message had rippled through the organization. Respect wasn't optional, and the old ways of treating people as disposable based on their job titles had ended permanently. Isaac had become Amara's closest collaborator and most enthusiastic supporter, often joining her for coffee in the employee break room, where she still chose to eat lunch, not because she had to, but because she wanted to maintain connections with employees at every level of the organization. You need to see this, Isaac said one afternoon, sliding a tablet across the table with barely contained excitement. The Tokyo Partnership announcement. Amara watched video footage from their latest international negotiation. The Japanese executives weren't just smiling, they were genuinely engaged, laughing at cultural references that bridged language barriers, sharing personal stories that transformed business relationships into lasting partnerships based on mutual respect and understanding. Firm. Dr. Yamamoto specifically asked that all future negotiations include you personally. Isaac continued, his pride evident in every word. He said, and this is a direct quote, "Finally, Americans who understand that successful business is built on relationships and cultural respect, not just financial transactions." Dr. Bennett has shown us that Westbridge Group values our perspective enough to truly listen to our concerns and ideas. But the most profound change was happening beyond the corporate walls, in a program that exemplified everything the new Westbridge Group hoped to become. The company had quietly partnered with Riverside Memory Care and 6 other facilities to establish the Westbridge Family Support Initiative, a comprehensive program for employees with family members facing cognitive decline, chronic illness, disability, or other significant care needs. The program provided additional paid leave, flexible scheduling access to better care facilities, transportation assistance, and most importantly, the recognition that caring for family members wasn't a burden to be hidden, but a responsibility to be supported and honored. Dr. Sarah Bennett had been the program's first beneficiary, and her new living situation represented everything that became possible when a company chose to invest in the complete humanity of its employees. Amara visited her mother every evening at Westwood Memory Center, a private facility where dignified care came with gardens that bloomed in 4 seasons. Music therapy conducted in multiple languages, art programs designed to stimulate remaining neural pathways, and staff trained to communicate with residents using whatever linguistic or emotional keys might unlock moments of connection and recognition. The room held her mother's books, photographs from her teaching career at universities around the world, and fresh flowers that Ethan sent weekly, not as a gesture of guilt or obligation, but as an expression of respect for a family whose sacrifices had educated his company about the true meaning of human value. "Good evening, Mama," Amara said softly, settling into the comfortable chair beside her mother's bed, as evening light streamed through windows that overlooked a garden where other families gathered for visits that mattered immeasurably. Dr. Bennett turned toward her daughter's voice, and for a moment, just a moment, her eyes focused completely, holding the clarity that sometimes pierced through the Alzheimer's fog like sudden sunlight breaking through storm clouds. Amara. "My dear child," she said in German, the language that often reached her most clearly now. "Tell me about your day. Are you still helping people understand each other?" These were precious moments, flashes of recognition and connection that came less frequently now, but felt like gifts when they arrived. Amara had learned to treasure them without mourning when they passed, understanding that love persists and grows even when memory fails. "No. I helped 2 companies understand each other today," she replied in German, the language that had connected them both to a wider world. Language builds bridges between hearts that have never met, just like you taught me in all those lectures I attended as a child. "Language is love made audible," her mother replied, quoting a line from her old academic presentations with the precision that sometimes returned without warning. "Never forget that, sweetheart. Words can heal or wound, connect or divide. We must always choose healing, always choose connection." The door opened quietly. Ethan stood in the doorway, holding his weekly flowers, bright sunflowers, that always made Dr. Bennett smile even on days when she didn't recognize faces or remember names or understand where she was. "Mr. Ethan." Dr. Bennett's face lit up with genuine pleasure. Over the past months, she had developed a fondness for this gentle man who brought flowers and spoke careful German with her daughter. "How are you today?" she asked in German. "Very well, thank you, Dr. Bennett." "And how are you?" he replied in heavily accented but earnest German, the result of weekly language lessons with Amara that were part of his personal commitment to better understand the cultures his company now served with genuine respect. They sat together for an hour, sharing stories in mixed languages, while Dr. Bennett dozed peacefully between conversations, surrounded by the kind of comprehensive care that money alone couldn't buy, but that compassion and community could provide. When it was time to leave, Ethan walked with Amara to the parking garage, their weekly routine that had evolved into something resembling friendship, built on shared understanding of second chances and the long, important work of redemption. "The Berlin office has made you an offer," he said, as they reached her car, his tone carefully neutral. "Head of European Operations. It would be a significant promotion, excellent compensation, and you'd be close to your academic colleagues again, back to the world, where your expertise was always recognized and valued." Amara paused, her hand on the car door, considering an opportunity that would have been a dream just months ago. That's an incredible opportunity. It is. You've earned it 10 times over, and everyone would understand if you took it." He hesitated, then continued with the vulnerability of someone who had learned that honesty was harder, but more valuable than pride. "But I hope you'll stay." "Why?" Ethan looked back toward the memory care center, its windows glowing warm against the evening sky, then toward the Manhattan skyline, where Westbridge Group's building stood as a symbol of transformation rather than just corporate success. "Because you've taught us something we didn't know we needed to learn. That seeing people really seeing them isn't just about kindness or social responsibility. It's about recognizing the extraordinary in the ordinary, the brilliant in the overlooked, the valuable in the dismissed. It's about understanding that every person carries capabilities and wisdom that can benefit everyone if we're humble enough to look and listen. And if I stay, we keep learning. From you, from each other, from every person who walks through our doors. We become the kind of company that doesn't just do international business. We become the kind of company that builds international understanding, that creates opportunities for people to bridge differences instead of exploiting them, that proves business can be both profitable and profoundly human." Amara smiled, and in that smile was an answer that would shape not just her future, but the future of everyone who would work for or with Westbridge Group in the years to come. "I'll stay," she said. "But I want to expand the family support program to include other companies in our network. And I want to establish scholarships for employees' children who want to study languages and international relations. And I want to create internships for students from underrepresented backgrounds who might otherwise never have access to international business opportunities. I'm done. Whatever you need, whatever it takes." As they parted ways in the parking garage, Ethan called after her one final time. "Dr. Bennett, thank you for saving more than just a business deal, for saving us from ourselves and for showing us what we could become." She nodded, understanding that some transformations take time to fully unfold, but that the courage to begin them starts with a single choice: to see clearly, to value truly, and to recognize that extraordinary contributions can come from the most unexpected places. 1 year later, Isaac found Amara in her office preparing for a video call that would connect universities and businesses across 4 continents in a groundbreaking discussion about the future of international communication and cultural bridge building. The Westbridge Global Understanding Initiative had grown far beyond anyone's expectations, creating opportunities for students worldwide while establishing the company as an international leader in cross-cultural business practices. "Dr. Bennett," he said, using the title that had become natural and meaningful for everyone in the building, "there's someone here who wants to meet you." A young Latina woman stood behind him, wearing the same blue maintenance uniform Amara had once worn, but carrying herself with the confidence of someone who knew her worth, wouldn't be defined by fabric or assumptions. "This is Maria Gonzalez," Isaac continued with obvious pleasure. "She's working in our facilities management department while finishing her engineering degree at night. She speaks 4 languages fluently and has some fascinating insights about improving our communications with South American partners. She also has ideas for making our building operations more environmentally sustainable." Amara stood immediately, extending her hand with genuine warmth and interest. "Maria, please sit down. I'd love to hear your thoughts both about communications and sustainability. We're always looking for ways to improve." As Maria began sharing her insights with the passion of someone finally being heard and valued, Amara caught Isaac's eye and smiled. The cycle was beginning again, but this time brilliance wouldn't be hidden in shadows, and good ideas wouldn't be dismissed because of their source. Don't let assumptions blind you to extraordinary people. The one who can change everything is often the one most overlooked in the room. Wisdom can wear a work uniform, and leadership might come pushing a cleaning cart. Look closer. Listen more. A person's worth isn't measured by their title or paycheck. Remember, Amara, the one who changes the world might be standing right in front of you.